Hey, this is Brian Glass with the Live Life Big podcast, and today's guest is Alexander Papadopoulos, who's an ultra runner and the owner of Athletic Equation. Welcome, Alex.
Hey, thanks for having me today, Brian.
How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. And
made the drive, survived the traffic.
And it's first week of January 2020, and you've finally hit the taper for the Hurt 100.
Yes. Yep. Started that Saturday. Had last, as they say, long run, which was for those of you who don't run out there, about 3.5 hours and just under 12 miles in Shenandoah National Park.
Yeah. And so that's coming up in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks for you?
Yeah, it'll 6 a.m. Hawaii time on 18 January, which equates to 11 a.m. here.
Fly out a couple days early, acclimate to the time change, and then go run 100 miles.
Yeah, with the exception of we're making it a family vacation, and we're bringing our 2 girls with us, and they just got off of 2 weeks of school, and we're pulling them out of school for 13 days. And
13 days.
Yeah, so we'll be there 2 weeks.
Awesome.
Yeah, so
awesome.
Flying that far, you gotta make a commitment and have a good time with them.
And this will be Hurt number what for you?
It'll be the 15th time I'm starting the race.
Wow. And how many times have you finished?
15 times starting. It'll be the 13th time when I cross the finish line.
Okay. All right. So Alex is a friend of mine going on 4 or 5 years now. He hosts a number of races at Lake Anna and at Prince William Forest, and also a couple of harder races up in New Jersey, and we'll get into that. But why don't we start with, what is an ultramarathon?
So ultra run, at its simplest definition, is a distance, a foot race, whether it be on the asphalt, on crushed gravel trails, or on mountainous trails, of greater than a marathon. So a marathon is defined as 26.2. For those of you don't know the exact number, and then so it's anything after that, whether it's 26.8 or 30 miles, generally 50K, and up beyond 100 mile and beyond now.
So, and most people would say it starts at a 50K, right? You don't find too many 27, 28 mile races.
No, you don't. Yeah, generally, if you want to draw a hard line in the sand, I would say that 50K, that 31.1 mile distance is where you earn your stripes as a ultra marathoner, ultra runner.
And I was looking at your ultra sign up, which is where we all go to check the scorecard.
Yeah.
and you're a veteran of at least 50 races. And from what I could tell, and the Hurt must not all be on there, but I thought I only saw 2 DNFs on there. So only has started at least 50 and have only not crossed the finish line a handful of times.
Yeah, that's as you're saying that, it's just running through my head. I never looked at that really, really closely. But yeah, have I kept track of those DNFs? Yeah, but I didn't realize that it was gotten up to 50 now. But 2 DNFs. One of those being the Hurt 100. As like I said earlier, as I've got this will be my 15th start, but I've got 14 starts and 12 finishes. So 1 DNF there. And another DNF at the Plain 100 out in Leavenworth, Washington.
And so the question that I always get when I'm going to ask you some of the questions that I get when I tell people about this stupid hobby that I have and that you have. Number one, what do you eat when you're running?
There's what I used to eat and what I eat now, I guess, is maybe a good way to explain that. And part of that is learning over the years. When I initially started, ran my first 100 miler, my first 50. The if you want to call it the running industry, and then ultra running, you focus in on gels and these power drinks and all that. And while they're good for shorter, and not say shorter, but in time duration, 2 to 4 hours, they work great. But once you start to extend beyond the 6 to 8 hour endurance events where you're putting one foot in front of the other, or it could be skiing or even mountain biking, you need to start looking at calories that are going to provide sustenance, real food.
Something that'll actually keep you full.
Yeah, so my first few years, it was, you may laugh at this, first 100 miler, I think I threw down 30 gels.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, which Yeah, the Massanutten 100, and it was. Now I look back at that, I was like, what was I thinking? And I was drinking a drink called Accelerate, which was really good. But I would just always have some type of issue, you know, whether it was the ups and downs, and part of the emotional highs and lows that come with these events. And I slowly started to dabble into better foods, foods that provided more sustenance. And I'm not talking to the classic what you'll see in an aid station, where you see your pretzels and your three, 4 different assortments of candies, chips, going into more real food like peanut butter and jelly, even packing my own food, making homemade bars, these things called peanut butter balls that I use during my races, which you can easily look up the ingredients for that. I'll say peanut butter, so a little bit of chocolate just for some flavor, oatmeal, something that's going to be hearty, potatoes. Started eating those, and then, believe it or not, getting into some other food, like some soups, Campbell's, and generally stuff that's going to be salty because you're sweating a lot, but also food that is calorie dense.
Yeah, and something to keep you warm at night.
Yeah, warm at night. Also, hamburgers, bacon. When you start to get into the early morning hours, some of these finer aid stations will have scrambled eggs. Your pig's in a blanket. They'll make pancakes, and you throw bacon in there, and then you throw it in a Ziploc bag, and you get your butt back out on the trail.
And get out off the aid station. And
get out of the aid station.
Start
with your bag
tracking
full
down
of food.
towards the next one.
Yeah, so so that's where I started with the gels, and then now I look at I do incorporate a couple gels here and there, a handful just as extra calories. I keep them with me if I'm having the need for extra calories, maybe a little extra caffeine because those have caffeine. I do drink some sodas too during the race. I don't drink sodas in my regular diet, so when I drink sodas during a race, I know it provides me that extra sugar and caffeine boost. Right. Understanding how, but in that evolution from those gels to, if you want to say real food that I've described, is understanding how your body reacts to that food. And looking back now, like the gels, while I'm not poo-pooing them because I know that there's a specific place and time for them, I want to avoid them because my body's not going to react to them down the line, specifically scratching in the woods.
Yeah, and then as your stomach starts to go, so does your race, right? So I mean, my experience is the gels were great, except that I was never full when I was doing gels, right? It's great for a marathon, because it's quick and it's easy and it's not going to upset you, and you're running the whole time.
Yes.
But for an ultra, if you're going to be hiking in the woods and spending 24, 30 hours on your feet, you want to eat something that's going to keep you full.
Yeah, satiated. Yeah, and in that, if I mentioned also, the last couple of years, I've gotten into eating nuts, just mixed nuts. Sometimes I'll throw in some cranberries in there. Most of the time I mix it myself. If I'm being lazy, I'll grab a bag from Trader Joe's or just out of your mix dispensers from the grocery store. But yeah, it's a lot of the race is about the food, and like you said, if your stomach starts to go sideways, that's a key component to your event. If you can't eat anything, calories, you're expending calories and you're not putting any in, and it's a slippery slope, and it
and it happens fast.
Yeah, and it happens before you know it,
and so the other thing that people ask is, like, I look at your hurt times in 31, 33 hours roughly. Do you sleep at all during that event?
In that event, I have not. There's other events
Have you done races where you've taken a little nap?
Yeah. There's a couple where I raced overseas, coinciding with a trip to Greece, and just the jet lag. It was brutal. And the night before the race, when you lie down in bed for 8 hours, you thinking you're going to get some sleep. In reality, you only sleep 2 hours. And then you're up at 4:30 to get ready for your 6 a.m. race. Yeah. So it was, slept for about 15 minutes.
Recharge, get some coffee, get back out of the aid station.
Yeah, exactly. It was came in with a group of people, and I got my stuff ready, and they were still plowing away, taking care of themselves. I said, all right, wake me up when you guys are ready to go. It was about 15 minutes. And
are you somebody that listens to music out on the trail?
I don't. Yeah. Me personally, I'm not a fan of it, especially, at least where I go usually, I enjoy running alone in the woods, and while there's a very dangerous aspect to it, I enjoy that piece. Solitude, reset button before I get back to integrate myself back into society after a nice 6 hour, 8 hour hike. And it just, it gives you time to think.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I'll put in headphones when I'm training. I'll listen to podcasts or listen to music, but I never do it during a race. And certainly I spend enough time alone during a longer race. It's not like a marathon where you're in a crowd and when there's spectators. Like nobody's generally cheering for you, except if you're in and out of an aid station. But I never put in headphones during a race just because I don't know why, but I always do it training. I would not go out on a 2-hour training run without headphones in.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like me, I've never done that either, and maybe it's because I internalize quite a bit when I run. But at least me, especially when I'm out in the Shenandoahs, where it's, bottom line is that, we're out there with a lot of
bears.
a lot of bears, the wilderness, and something can go wrong. And, for me, it's feeling the sounds, the sights, the smells of being outdoors. Yeah. But also I see it as a safety issue. Yeah. But you said, especially during the races, if I'm out there on my own, maybe I'd put my headphones in if I did, but that's different. But when you're in a race, even though you're running the race, there's a safety element that you're responsible for yourself, but there's also a group of other people that are responsible for you.
This is Alex, the race director, talking.
Yeah, this is Alex, the race director, talking. Whereas, and I view it as, as a race director, I have an obligation to you to keep you safe, and I don't know that a lot of people realize this, but I believe that there's an obligation for the runners to be safe, not only to themselves, but to be accountable to the race director, to make sure that they're doing things right in their race, so they're safe. For the race director, but also for themselves. And I do view, and there's been instances, I do view headphones out on the trail as a hazard, because you're in the wilderness. You're not in an urban environment where everyone else is doing it. You are in a location now where humans are no longer part of nature on a regular basis. I mean, we're in the urban jungle day to day, and I think a lot of people, as they transition into the woods with their trail running, they tend to look over the those dangers, as simple as small as they are, because especially in the woods, the small problems can exacerbate themselves.
Especially as you get into like the spring and summertime, you could be running and not hear a rattlesnake, right?
Yes, between the rattlesnakes, the bears, the deer. It's a little suddenly if you do have your headphones on and you're you're looking straight up down at your feet as you're climbing a mountain, and you look up and there's a bear 10 yards from you. Yeah, and that's happened to me a few times. Yeah, that's, you've got the fear of God in your eyes and your mind and a heartbeat.
Yeah, well, and then you. So typically, what happens is the bear takes off and goes the other way up over a hill, and then you spend the rest of the run worried about where it is, or if its mom is there, right?
Yeah, and then they're generally just as scared as you are, you are of them, and they are of you. And that's a big thing. Is you hope that that's not a mama bear. Right. If that's a mama bear, then, or if you see a cub, and you're like, all right, where's mom? And make sure you're not between the bear and mom. And
right. So what does an average training week for you look like as you're getting ready for a 100-mile race?
I guess a question back to you is what phase of the training? So early on in the training, it would be, you're building up. The best way I can describe it, I would think as a well-laid training plan is much like the stock market, where you're training up. You're probably, and then you have a little bit of a dip, or a market correction, where you let your body recover, and then you keep going up. You build up a little bit further, and then you've got a little bit of a, downward trend again. Let the body recover, market check, and then you keep going. And then you do that. If you follow, certain plans, you do that 3-4 times, 4 or 5 months. If you're shooting for a goal race, whether it's a 50-mile or 100-mile, even a 50K. But you build up in that fashion. Usually, specifically, it would be like a 3-week build-up and like a 1 week drop off, let your body recover. And then usually, depending on your training cycle, about 3 weeks out from your from your goal race or ultramarathon, in my case, the Hurt 100, you start a taper where you start dropping off your miles, and that taper will be initiated by your final last long run. And ideally, most of this training as you go through will be specific to the race that you have decided to run. So I'll use myself as an example with the Hurt 100. It is considered a very mountainous. While you're not in high mountains, the 100 miles does cover 25,000 feet of vertical. Yeah. So, some they advertise 25. I've seen many GPS that are in the realms of 28 to 29,000 feet of vertical. With
roots and mud, and I mean, I've seen some videos and some photos from Hurt, and it doesn't look it doesn't look like a lot of it is runnable.
No, and it's a lot of hiking. Maybe the elite guys are running a little bit more than the mid to back of the packers, but you're hiking most of the time, and then you've got steep, vertical. I think your longest climb isn't. It's about 2 miles, but you're, in some areas you're pushing a 20%, 25% incline, and like you said, you've got rocks, you've got roots, and it's not your, nice, pretty going up the stairs. Everything's uneven. You are in a, tropical rainforest, so you've got the mud. I mean, the rocks, will be slick. It's a looped course, so with that too, you've got 125 people running pretty much the same track. So you're going to get, there's already mud everywhere, but then the track itself becomes slippery because you have the environmental effects. You've got condensation, you've got humidity, so everything ends up with this little fine film of mud and dirt on it. And unless you get a heavy rain, it's a sloppy, wet mess, and you're constantly looking for traction.
So how do you replicate that in training on the East Coast?
I don't know that you can.
Yeah. Well, what have you done?
But a lot of it for me, the slipperiness, the mud is very difficult to replicate. But what you can replicate is the terrain, and that's where it goes into part of the training on a detail level is your specificity, is looking at that. At the topographical profile of the course, but also of what people have put out there with their GPSs, what the race advertises. Bottom line, doing your research in the race, and I like to find mountains that are, knowing that race is like I know that the longest peak will take me about an hour to climb, so I replicate, an hour and a half of straight climbing. And then with Hurt, if you look at the profile, as soon as you get to the top, you might have a little flat area, but you're going straight back down. So it's, you're looking at mountain repeats, and that's where you're going to get your training specificity.
And people underestimate how hard it is late in a race to go back down.
Yes, it's sort of a misnomer. Say, hey, you're at the top. It's easier when you go back down. And the reality is, that's probably good for, depending on your level of fitness and how you've trained, again, with the specificity, it might be good for 20, 30, 40, 50 miles, but then you've got 50 more to go. Yeah. Or if you make it to 60, then you still have 40 to go. And then the downhills, your quads are shot. Or, one thing that gets overlooked is, running at night and how that impacts your body, because based on the way we live our lives on a daily basis, I mean, we sleep at night, and now you have to run through the night. So you're fighting your circadian rhythms. You're fighting physical fatigue. You're fighting mental fatigue at night, and that also slows you down. So it's you're reading headlamps. You're reading lights off of a headlamp, one or two.
And at night, your entire world condenses to like the 15 feet of light if you've got a really good headlamp, right?
Yeah. That's your world, and then. You're just hoping, all right, around the next turn, when's that next aid station coming?
I can hear the cowbells, right? Yeah. I can smell the bacon. Where's the aid station?
And depending where you are in the course that it's at, you sometimes you hear those bells and you're still 30 minutes away. Yeah. And you think it's around the corner, so that starts to play with your mind. Yeah. So it's a constant battle, but you slow up later on at night, and sometimes it's the, you look forward to that constant climb. I think I'd prefer to be climbing. versus descending.
Right. I can walk if we can climb.
Yeah.
I won't feel like I have to run anymore.
Yeah.
So what is when you get up to a peak training week, how many miles or do you think about it in terms of miles or do you think about it in terms of hours?
I think of it in terms of hours, because the reality is I won't get bore with the details of the physiological data that's out there and how people train, but there's a law of diminishing returns with training runs, with the time on your feet and what you put yourself through. So for me, it's always been a function of time, not necessarily the miles. A race, going back to the Hurt race, it's a function of time. It's a race that, as we've talked about, because of the hiking, it's mostly a hiking race. Yeah, you can run the downhills, and then we just talked about at night, later in the race, your downhills become a lot slower, and you got to take comfort in your climbing abilities. Is that the Hurt is a slower race, and and the numbers are there. Again, using myself as an example, where I've had the opportunity to run a 26-hour 100-miler, and when I get to Hurt, I average about 5 hours slower.
Right.
So so I use that, and just looking at what some other people's times, even the elite folks, with the exception of one or two people, where their times are they can run, believe it or not, like a 17, 18-hour 100-miler that's fast runnable. When they get to Hurt, they're in the 22, 23-hour realm, and they're still top 5. So to if that puts that into perspective, everyone's running like 3 to 5 hours slower off of their regular pace. So it's a grind. There isn't a free step on the course, and you're fighting exhaustion. You're fighting your time on your feet with everything else that we've put together.
When you're like 6 weeks out, how many hours a week are you putting in?
So sorry, I missed that, didn't I?
That's all right. That's all right.
Bottom line, sorry, it's a function of time.
Yeah.
Is how I look at my miles. I've never been, and because of that, I've never been a high mileage person. I love getting out to the Shenandoahs, the local park here, Prince William Forest Park. But even there, your miles are slower. So for me, in a peak week, I'm probably pushing between 15 and 20.
Okay.
Probably closer to 20 hours. This training cycle was close to 20 hours.
Yeah.
My last long training run was supposed to be about 15 hours. And I had I went hypothermic for the first time in about 15 years. So I had to cut it short. And so I was just reflecting on that.
Yeah,
and
right.
And it was going back to, prepping for your runs and making sure that you're, well situated. It was just one of those things. I was like, this can go bad fast, and I had to cut my run short. So, bottom line, it was about 20 hours this week. Total miles, in the realms of about 70.
Yeah,
so
that's still a lot.
Yeah, and it's a lot. But it was that's actually not correct. It was closer to 50, because it did incorporate a lot of cross training this time around due to some injuries that I've had going into my training, and as a result of that, I had to diffuse a lot of my training with cross training. Yeah. Which is I think that'll help me a lot in this race.
I've never been able to get up over in a non-race week 40, 45 miles. I don't think I've ever hit 50. Even training for 100.
You've got
my body's just not built for that.
Yeah.
I don't think. Every time I do, I'm just so tired. And then just life, right? I mean, work, kids.
It's a struggle balancing
only
it all.
so many hours in the day, right? How did you get into ultramarathoning?
Yeah, it was by accident. Yeah, I started off, a couple years out of college. Was it? Yeah, first year out of college. It's like, all right. I had my cousin who's a couple years older than me. She was running the San Francisco Marathon, and she'd mentioned it. And I grew up doing, if you want to say endurance sports, I grew up playing soccer, wrestled in high school, and not to relive those years, because, but I had that. Individual sports, endurance based, and she said, "Hey, I'm running a marathon," and I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to give a stab at it. So I got into it, and it sort of stayed with me since. And then did that for 3 years, and I got bored with it.
That's kind of where I ended up.
So with the marathons.
I did it for like 3, 4, 5 years, and I wasn't getting any faster.
Mm-hmm.
And then I sort of discovered this other world where you could run longer and you didn't have to run the whole time.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's cool. Let me go try that out. So the earliest race result that I could find for you was a 2002 Bull Run, 50-mile race here in Clifton.
Good stalking, huh?
Yeah, well, I did a little bit of research.
Yeah.
And so you ran about 10:30 there, and then consistently got faster after that. Is that a function of knowledge or better training or both?
It was both.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really was both. It was and being I made the decision. If it was right around the November, so I really had 6 months of training to go into it, and I didn't know what to expect. And I'd like to say I did a lot of things right. I probably did more things wrong than right, and I guess wrong is not the right word if you hopefully learn from those lessons. And that's what I did. But it was, it was a challenge. It wasn't easy.
I mean, there's really something great about those early races, though, where you're like too stupid to know all of the mistakes that you're making.
Yeah.
And then as you learn more and more things, I just beat myself up. Like, oh, I didn't eat enough back there, right? Oh, I didn't do enough in training. But the first couple of times where you don't know what you don't know, there's something really fun about those.
Yeah, it's sort of the ignorance is bliss, and you go, and it's like, all right, this is sort of, you expect that, all right, this is the way everyone's feeling.
And everybody's looking at the guy who's eating 30 gels during messing up and going, what's wrong with him?
Yeah, and it's, you learn a lot from those early races, and sort of they say in the ultra community that running an ultramarathon it's sort of a microcosm in life with your ups and your downs.
Life in a day.
And and your lesson and the lessons that you can pull from that. It's a lot. It's a small microcosm of life, and maybe you hear a lot of people say that sounds cliche, but it's true.
Yeah. And as far as I could tell, you only run nasty long races, right? Like Massanutten 100, Hurt 100, Cruel Jewel down in Georgia. I don't see any. I mean, not that there are easy hundreds, but I don't see easy terrain. Flatter style races, and I don't see really any 50Ks, 50 miles. Are you deliberately choosing the hardest stuff you can find?
Yeah.
Why?
The part of it is I like the challenge. I maybe to say I'm attracted to something where the odds are against you, where the risk reward, where the risk is greater. And so is a reward. And maybe in its simplest answer, that's where it starts. But I think also there, a lot of those races where some of them are a lot more remote. They're a lot more self-reliant. And for me, that sort of mirrors the training. Like going back to when I go to the Shenandoahs, most of my running out there usually is alone. Maybe with one or two other people, but that's it. I enjoy the solitude of being out in the wilderness. I enjoy the mountains. The terrain where it's more rugged, more austere, where you really, but also where you're also getting that connection back with nature, in that solitude. But for me, it boils down to finding stuff that's difficult, that's challenging, that maybe is not going to be mainstream.
Yeah. And so,
and from there, you can really see. You find out more about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm glad you said that, because as somebody who only runs really hard, really long races and has only not finished 2, like I'm really curious what your 65, 70, 75 mile self-talk is like. When it's dark and you're hungry and you're tired.
Your mind sometimes goes in places where you don't want to tell people.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
No, but it's. I mean, sometimes it's a good place to get things straightened out.
Yeah.
Just sometimes you use clarity in moments. you get clarity of moments in your life, where you're having challenges, and it can be anything, from, you'll focus on the smallest things, having kids at home, like, I probably could have handled that situation better with my kids, to, a lot of introspection, or, I this past race that we hosted was great, or, thinking about one of your kids' performances at school and how great it was, to the challenges of day-to-day life, whether it's work, with your marriage, everywhere. It's just, you think about everything. I don't know how to really describe it in detail.
It's a good, like, I call it almost meditative, right?
Yes,
in a trail race,
that's probably the best word for it.
You're focused on 7, 8, 10 feet in front of your feet, right? Because if you're not, you're going to trip. So, and you can tune out everything else, and right? I mean, so the problem for me is my best thinking happens out there, but then I'm spent and I can't remember anything that I thought about when I got back.
And that's the best word probably for it. It's meditative. Yeah. And I find that, whether it's a long race or a tough training run, when I get back, I feel like I'm starting from zero again with myself, with everyone. I mean, you have everything that happened, but it's like, the reset button's been pushed. I'm back into everything with fresh eyes, fresh perspective. But I would say, a lot of what I keep in my mind, especially during the run, is, you're thinking about all these things. I like to say sometimes you're thinking about everything and nothing at the same time. Because, like you said, it's like when you get off the trail, you're done with that race. What did I think about for 100 hours? Yeah. A euphoric fog. Yeah. And you're probably still suffering for a few days afterwards, depending on how it went, how you ate, your hydration, your nutrition, the blisters on your feet, whether you had them or not, the aches, pains. But for me, it's, driving forces, there's a lot of them. But I would say, as much as I enjoy the trails, being out there, the bottom line for me is that I spend a lot of time away from my family. And I do think, to an extent, in effect, it is, and people might disagree with me. They probably do. Might even get pissed off. I think this sport is relatively selfish.
It's really selfish.
And I owe it to my family to finish all of these events. Right. And that's sort of that's my mentality going into it. It's, when I go out there this past weekend, it's like I miss. Our weekend is, all right, Alex goes running. I get up at 3 a.m. in the hopes of being home by noon. Yeah. And then, as with your kids growing up, right? Yeah, they're not even taking a nap. That would be a luxury. Yeah. It's fallen into the kids' activities, and then you've got to stay up till 8 or 9 or 10 at night, which is fine. It's people call it sleep deprivation training for what we do in our races. Yeah. But the bottom line, I think that's probably easier.
Oh, I had that. I ran Laurel Highlands a couple of years ago. I think 2 years ago. Yeah. And just like a month before our third son was born. And I remember very vividly coming into this aid station. I think it was mile 54 and going somewhere around 50 and sitting in a chair and going, I'm done, right? That race is in early June. It's in western Pennsylvania. It was hot. I fell about 5 miles into the race. I didn't want to be there. And then I pulled in and I sat down at that aid station. I was like, I could go home. But in order to go home, I got to call my wife, who's an hour away at her friend's house where we were staying. She's got to come pick me up. After I make that call, I've got to sit and think about my decision for an hour while she's coming to pick me up. And then I'm going to have to ride back with her. And then I'm going to have to ride back with the family the next day, 3 or 4 hours back to our house. And I just didn't bring everybody out here to western Pennsylvania to quit at mile 54 or whatever it was. So I got my ass out of the aid station. Started walking across the bridge. And then finished sometime around 1 a.m. that night. But you're right. It really is a selfish endeavor because you spend so much time away from everybody else.
Yeah, it is. And it's, maybe that's something to said for the commitment that we have when we set our minds to something as people and to achieve it. But there's, there's effects. And, I think a lot of them are positive, but there's a lot of them that, hey, Dad's not here again for my game.
Right.
He's out running.
Right.
Or he couldn't do this, he couldn't do that because he had to go running again.
Well, now we've told everybody how selfish this sport is. Let's talk about your series of events in Northern Virginia and elsewhere. So you run a company called Athletic Equation.
Yeah.
You and your wife.
Yes. Yep. And a number of good friends.
And the whole family, your whole family is out there on the weekends in Prince William and in Lake Anna putting on the race and working in the kitchen and helping out with the aid stations and things like that.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk a little bit about first about the race series that you have?
So we've got it called Athletic Equation Trail Series, and it's grown now. Almost, I shouldn't say losing count of the races, but we've got 5 core races, and then just this year we've added, or last year, we added an all-women's trail race, where I think as far as our research shows, we're the only one in the country, or at least the first to market. And it's women only, so we have these 6 races, and then we have on one of the races we have 3 races that we host simultaneously. And so I guess that makes it 9 or 10.
Yeah,
whatever.
I tried to count the events, and I was
6
like, I don't know
discrete dates throughout the year.
I don't know how Alex counts these.
But yeah, so we've got these. So we've got 6 races that are with discrete dates, where we host races, and then we've got one in November up in the Delaware Water Gap, which is a fat ass, which is a free race that's hosted by local trail people, and call it a flash mob at a trailhead. And they're usually small, potluck, and it's about friendship and camaraderie and sharing experiences on the trail. But our focus with Athletic Equation is bringing new runners to the trail market. And the way we've done that over the years, we started with a 24-hour race, which is sort of all the way up here, and then after that, 2 years later, we introduced an 8-hour and 12-hour. And the way we've structured these races is our loops are, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty, they're about 4.65 miles to 8-mile loops.
Right.
And the runners, they have that amount of time to run as many miles as they can. And a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know, I can't run for 8 hours. And I think what people miss, and really trying to shape, change the mindset, change the paradigm, is you're out there to run as much as you feel like running. And it's not about running that 5K or 10K where, hey, Brian, you ran a 10K last week. That is awesome. What was your time?
Yeah.
That's the how many times that happened to you? Right. That's the first question.
Did you win?
Yeah. Did you win? And then you're getting
never won a race in my life.
and by default, it's like you're getting racked and stacked. All right. So you ran 1 hour for your 10K, which is a great time. Maybe you just came off the couch 2 months ago, but people don't. They don't ask that. It's all right. Oh, you ran an hour. All right. So he's a 10-minute miler. So he's a runner. I don't know if he's serious about it. Oh, you ran a 33. Ooh,
well, that's the other thing about ultras is everybody's got some conception for like how fast they could run a 5K or a 10K or 10 mile, and even maybe not everybody, but a recreational runner has some idea of what they could run a marathon in.
Yeah.
Once you start talking longer, then nobody cares what your time is.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it. I mean, when you get these races where your attrition rate is 20%, 30%, 40%. That's where it's. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're first. Doesn't matter if you're worst. If you look at the community, it's about accomplishing.
Well, and that's what I really enjoy.
In the battles that we wage within physically.
Yeah, that's what I enjoy about your races. So your races start off with an 8-hour race down in Lake Anna, and then you do a 12 and a 24. Just talking about the timed ones now, but a 12 and a 24 in Prince William Forest. And at the 8, you do something nice for everybody who's never run an ultra before, right? You start with a lay, and you get an award for finishing your first ultra if you make it past 26.2.
Yep. Yeah. We started that. I think that was the very first year, and that was something that we noticed at having run a few races before we started personal races before we started Athletic Equation, was that running an ultra for some people can be life-changing. And it takes on a different shape for each person who runs it. And being an organizer, I'm honored that people come to our events and say, hey, this is my first ultramarathon, and then you see those people come back to other races. You come back to your race and they say, they'll tell you, like, this was my first ultra. I was like, yeah, I remember that. I handed you your plaque. Yeah. And to your point, not to do the pat on the back. Each one of those awards is custom engraved with their name and the date, and it says first ultramarathon. Yeah. And personally, I believe that's a threshold, and then they may never run another one again. But and you can see it in their eyes. A lot of people, it's changed something in them. Maybe they doubted themselves. They've got a new level of confidence coming out of this. But yeah, we do that. It's something we've always done. We continue to do it. It'll never change. And we're starting to see other races do it now too. And that's pretty exciting.
And the other thing that I like about yours is they're especially the 8, 12, and 24 is they're really accessible for somebody who's just starting out, right? Because number one, it's a small looped course, so you're going to see other people. You're not going to be in the woods by yourself, by and large, for long stretches of time. And for the most part, your races, once you do one loop, you can do the loop in whatever direction you want to, right? So so you see people coming and going, and everybody encourages each other. But you're really never more than like 3 miles from food, one way or the other. Yeah. So you're never out there, and you never can't. It's hard to run out of water, although you could do it in Prince William.
If you make a wrong turn.
Yeah, if you make a wrong turn, that's right. I did that during the 24 one year. I hadn't seen anybody or any flags for a while, and shit.
We've got the Lost Soul Award for that one. For the 24 hour.
The bonus miles, right?
Yeah.
And that'll ruin your race early on if you get a couple bonus miles. But there's always somebody else out there, and it's just a great first toe in the water kind of event to run. And then you've got everything all the way up to Mount Tammany, which I think is expert level, right?
Yeah.
So 10 hours, 10 1.8 mile loops that gain and lose 1,200 feet every single time.
Yes.
The only event that I've ever DNF'd, that a couple of years ago, I made it 8 loops.
Yeah, I remember that.
Well, what I tell myself is that was the year that it snowed like 14 inches 2 days before the race, right?
Yeah. That was a...
But I think it candidly probably made the descent of Tammany a little easier having snow rather than scree.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. That's a crazy. Yeah, we call it that's our fast pack hike race, and it's that's pretty much ridiculous. Even downhill, you can't really run.
You know what? That's not.
Well,
it's not my only DNF. Now that I'm thinking about it.
Which was your other one?
Was the 50 miler, the OSS 50 miler.
Oh yeah.
In the middle of June or July overnight.
That's right. We talked about that a couple weeks ago.
Alex has this race in Prince William Forest that starts at 7 o'clock at night. It's in July or June. June?
Yeah, June. Yeah, usually first. This year it's going to be the second weekend in June.
Yeah, and so it was. I think the year that I did it, race started. It was 90 degrees, 95% humidity. I had decided 12 miles in that I was going to quit, but this is the only one that has a really long loop, so you got to get 25 miles in before you can quit. That was a miserable night, so thank you for that.
I know. Glad to help out.
That's not a good first ultramarathon.
Nah. That was your first? That wasn't your first.
That wasn't my first.
No, we've had a few people who have accomplished that as their first, and they finished there. I was way in over my head, and it's. But no, we started that race to shed light on the history of the OSS and their role in World War II, and that was a predecessor agency to the CIA. We have no affiliation with any of those organizations. Right. It's just simply OSS/CIA. And we got a link that you can click on to the history of the park. And the quick 15-second elevator pitch is that park, Prince William Forest Park, was one of 4 locations here in the metro area where they trained OSS operatives for their covert operations. Another one, hopefully I got my facts right, was the Congressional Golf Course. That used to be another one. Now it's a golf course. And then you had two up in the Catoctin area. And then I believe there was a fifth one that focused on explosives and demolition. And I can't remember where that was at. But we created that race. Prince William, I've been running there for about 15 years, was really to shed light onto the unique history of the OSS. So.
And then you talked a little bit about it, but you have a women-only race called the No Man's 50K, and there's also a 11-mile and a 25K option. So you can get a PR in whatever you're running an 11 or 25K, because those are few and far between. But do you want to talk about that a little bit? Why you started that?
Yeah. So I can't say that it was my idea. It was our older daughter, Katie. 4 years ago, she's just one of those things. She said, "Dad, how come no women run your races?" And we looked at the stats. It's usually women are about 25 to 20 to between 20 and 30 across all races. I think with our races, the athletic equation, and everyone that puts efforts into it, we've and I think because of the beginner element that they offer with the loop courses like we talked about, that our numbers are usually above 40%, right around 40. 2 years ago, our 12-hour, we had 57% women in the race, which just bogged our minds. So going back to Katie, she made that description, that observation, and she said, "Well, I'm going to host one, and you can help me organize it."
Great,
great wisdom of a 7-year-old.
Awesome.
So flash forward 3 years later, which is November of 18. September of 18. She brought it up again, and I said, "Well, honey, you think you're old enough and you're ready to be a race director?" And she said, "Yeah." So we helped her. All right. Granted, as parents, we probably did the bulk of the work, but they were with us every step of the way, making the final decisions. And she helped us build a web page. Had her read through everything, make sure we did our due diligence, and by her. We have her and her younger sister. They select the awards. They select the T-shirts. They're there throughout the race. Our daughter does the pre-race brief to the group of women, and that was her idea, and so we're helping her bring it to fruition.
So last year was the inaugural one?
Yeah, so last year was the inaugural one.
So how many participants did you have?
We kept it at 40. There were some, even though it was Prince William, it was in the wintertime, then we had some logistical challenges. Part of that being is all the facilities in Prince William are shut down.
Right, the water just isn't running in the bathrooms.
Yeah. So normally where we've got water supply, we've got bathrooms. We now have to take care of that all on your own. Really, in effect, hosting not an austere environment, but even though you're in civilization, only a mile or two from roads and all that, it's similar to hosting a race in a national forest where you don't have access to water, you don't have access to bathrooms, and all right. And granted, those are creature comforts. But we still have that safety element in place.
It's nice to have a bathroom before you run a race.
So we had those to contend with, and we decided the first year that we weren't going to do any open advertising. And the people, we had 40 folks come out for the first year, and I don't think we released any information on it till January. So we purposely wanted to keep it small. I think it would be great to have a race with 200, but in our experiences, start first year, keep it small, make sure you're doing everything right by your participants, and making sure that you're able to handle a new race with everything else that we have going on in life.
And so will you have more this year?
Yeah, so right now we're already at, I think, 75.
Wow.
So that's across all 3 races.
That's awesome.
And the big thing that we found from our first race was, hey, it's a loop race. How come you don't have just a one loop or something shorter? And he said, all right, and then in going back to, and maybe haven't done these races over the years, it's like, hey, what's our our goal with doing these is bringing new people, novice runners, trail runner, and exposing them to trail running, or novice trail runners, exposing them to longer distances. It's like, hey, we didn't have the shorter options, much like we do on our 8, 12, and 24, where people go out there and run as much as they want. So
well, and then letting them see somebody who says, oh, my belief is I can only run 11 miles, right? Letting them see somebody who's running 50K and going, that person isn't a whole lot different than me. I bet I could.
Oh yeah,
So,
absolutely, and it brings it closer, and then you have the opportunity to run with other people that are, and digressing a little bit, I remember the Bull Run where you saw back in 2002, a couple local legends. I think that at least here regionally, even nationally, I'm sorry, both Gary Nippling and Tom Green. Yeah, I met them both in that first trail race.
I don't think you could run a race and not meet Gary.
No. Yeah, if he's running it, you will meet him. In sharing the trail with Tom Green.
Yeah.
I had at that point, that was my first 50 miler, and that was 18 years ago now. And so I had spent 5 miles with him in mid-30s, and so what have you run?
Did you know who he was when you started talking with him?
I didn't have a bloody clue who he was. Oh, Tom Green, good to meet you. I'm Alex.
Yeah.
Last name's Papadopoulos. I know I'll forget, so maybe we'll see each other at the end. He's like, oh, so we were at the same pace for a little while. So what have you done? He's like, well, and he just sort of said it. He's like, I've run 150 ultras.
So,
and this was 18 years ago.
And for people who aren't in this world, Tom is the first person to complete the Grand Slam of ultra running, which is finishing. You're gonna have to help me. Yeah. Western States, Wasatch, Leadville.
Yeah, Leadville.
And
the Western States, Wasatch, Leadville, Vermont,
and Old Dominion sometimes, right?
Well, they've reintegrated Old Dominion back into the mix.
Yeah.
So now you've got the 5 races to pick 4 of.
So finishing 4 100-mile ultramarathons within the span of one summer, really. And he was the first person to tick that off.
So I had no idea.
In the country. So it really is a national legend.
Yeah, and I had no idea I'm running with this guy. And I'm like, and I find out later, and I'm like, wow.
It's back to that ignorance of being too stupid to know. What you don't know.
Green.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa. And then I started looking. He's the one who created the Grand Slam.
Yeah.
And it was great. And then 2 years later, oddly enough, my sister runs her first 50, and she ran with him too. 4 or 5 miles. She's like, I ran into this guy Tom Green, and he's run like 200. Ultras.
Right. Crazy.
Yeah.
And so, in addition to these easy local races, you also have bitten off overseas adventure racing to Greece and Spain, and you're taking a group to Japan this year.
Yes. Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit.
So we started that about 3 years ago. And we brought a small group to Spain with Trail Run Spain. That went great, and it's something that I wanted to explore more at the time. And bottom line, it wasn't right with our lives and where we were with our kids, and with my wife's work and me hosting the races. So we had to dial it back a little bit. And now things have changed, and time has opened up a little bit. Priorities have shifted as they do with our lives. And now we're bringing folks to we're bringing groups. This past year, we brought a group from Japan to run the Eastern States for a week. So trail running adventures, where we identify a race, we reach out to the folks within the race, let them know what we're doing. They're willing to work with us, hopefully. In some cases, it has happened. But anyhow, so we build a relationship with the race, and then we bring a group of 10 people over. And then this year, second time around, with bringing a group of Americans to Japan to run the 5 Mountains 100-miler, working with a good friend of mine, Tomokazu Ihara, who's one of the top ultra runners in Japan. And we're building this, the new aspect of trail running. Maybe we're at the foreground of doing it. but doing a little bit more than, there are a lot of training camps around right now where you go to the locations and you spend a week there and run. So we want to introduce an element a little bit more, associated with tourism. There's groups running in the Alps, doing training runs here in the U.S., but really to take people out of their comfort zone, bring them into a whole other country, run a race, experience the culture. Spend time in some of those towns. You see some of the great historic things, but also to experience the culture and see what those local people are like. In the few times that I've had the opportunity to travel overseas and run a race. I grew up traveling overseas. Very fortunate to do that. So for me, it's part of it's in my blood to travel. I enjoy doing it. I enjoy traveling immensely. But now being able to incorporate my passion for trail running and experiencing what the local trail running culture is like in those different countries is just a whole new element of one of our hobbies. That's our passion to travel to Greece or to Spain or who knows, somewhere else in the Far East, maybe one day in Africa, who knows, and experience something completely different. Because the passion is the same, but the organizations, they're different, and you see that the races are run differently between organization to the way that people actually physically run them and what they do. So it's unique. It's special. So we're looking to develop that aspect of the business now.
Awesome.
So we'll have to get you to come with us with the members.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think it'll be a while.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that, right? I mean, I'm in a place in my life where I just have a really hard time, to your point about it being a selfish hobby, explaining, listen, I'm going to go out on Saturday and I'm going to leave the house at 4:30 and then I'm going to go for a 4-hour training run. And when I get home, I'm going to be tired. And I'm not going to be not going to be my 100% taking care of the kids, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, we also can't do anything Friday night because I got to go to sleep because I got to wake up and go leave the house at 4:30. So, I think
so that 4-hour run becomes a 2-day impact on your family.
That's right.
And sometimes we don't realize it. What's that trickle down effect that between the wife, the kids, the activities?
Yeah. So, it's something I would love to be able to devote time to again, but I also don't want to come out and do it and hate myself for the second half or the last third of a race, right? Because I wasn't able to do it well. So, anyway, January of 2020, what would you say to somebody who's looking at a New Year's resolution and wants to run their first ultramarathon this year? How would you tell somebody to start?
I'd say pick a race a few months out. Tell your friends about it.
Right.
Right. Oddly enough, at least for me, that makes you immediately accountable.
That's right.
Versus, you tell your spouse, your significant other, but you really tell your friends and start reaching out. At this day and age, when I started, 2002, but the internet wasn't as robust. You didn't have Facebook. You didn't have the mass social media where. If you committed yourself, say, hey, you know what, I'm going to commit myself to run a ultramarathon this year. It could be 50K, it could be a 50-miler. Pick it a few months out, but do your research. Within probably about 30 minutes, you've got hundreds of websites. You've got probably 60 different options, 100 different options. Within 100, at least here in the DC metro area, within 100 miles.
So many.
Yeah, and you can pick, and you have the options. Pick something that you're going to be comfortable with. Everyone likes something different. Some of the best runners that I've run into, they're not technical runners, so they stick to, your crush road, like an ICA type of terrain where it's not too technical. It's rolling hills, but hands down, they're some of the best runners. So pick something where you think it's going to be your strength. And for and people might not like me for saying this, is don't go with a canned training plan. And I'm not saying go out and get a coach.
Yeah.
At least what I found, when you go with a canned training plan, there's a hidden element of stress. Life is going to grab you at some point because you are when you start to train for an ultramarathon, and maybe I'm going a little tangent here, when you start training for an ultramarathon, like we've discussed over this time together, it's like it sucks up a lot of your time, and especially I think if you're single, it's a little bit different. If you're married, you've got a significant other, that's very different than being single. And then if you've got kids, it's your time is at a constant battle. So, I'm not saying go with a coach, but you've got to be able to manage your expectations going into your race. Yeah. And sometimes with those canned training plans for like a 4-month 50K, they're asking you to run a certain amount of miles and do this and that. Number one, sometimes that doesn't take into account the type of race you want to run. Whether it's could be a 50K, but it's super mountainous, beautiful. That's going to be very different kind of training from doing a Lake Anna or doing something that's on a crushed towpath like the C&O Canal.
Well, and it could be, some of those canned training plans are just overwhelming, right? So you might look at say a 50-mile training plan that has you doing 40, 50, 60 miles a week and includes a Saturday, Sunday couplet that's like 20 miles on Saturday, 10 miles on Sunday. And when you wake up Sunday morning and your legs feel like crap, you're like, oh, I can't do this. So yeah, I'm with you on that.
So so being able to, I would say, do the research, talk to friends, manage your training with the time that you have allotted to you, and manage those expectations as you go forward.
I think that component about tell your friends, just put a stake in the ground. I think that's so important to not just have internalized your goal, but to tell the world about it, because then you have that fear of failure, right? The fear of what happens if I don't do it.
Yeah.
Or now I got to take it off my calendar, but I've told
you told
Facebook about it, right? I think
that'd be the easiest way to get it out, right?
Well, yeah. I mean,
mass commitment.
I think that's so important to put something on the calendar and tell people whose opinion you care about that you're gonna go and do it, and then you'll figure out a way to go and do it and not quit or give up or quietly erase it, right?
Yeah, and that's the I think that's the linchpin to it. And then you can get into the psychology of it all. When people people ask me, what do you think about your first ultramarathon? For me, with any of these races, there's always an internalization, a visualization of how I'm going to perform. And there's plenty of studies that have done. That's sort of something that I did, and I didn't even know that it was something that that had a positive impact on performances. And then just over the years, getting into a little bit more of the sports science and the psychology of it all. Because with the hundreds, as you know, there's a lot of psychology that rolls into finishing your races. So visualize yourself running your event, and whatever that means to you. Visualize you being successful, crossing the finish line, and then rewind yourself back to the start, and then visualize yourself through the whole race. As you go through that, know that not everything is going to be good. Peaches. What's it? Peaches and cream? Is that the?
I don't know.
Whatever the expression is, everything's not going to be honky dory, but it's going to be, you're going to have some tough situations. You might fall down, you might scrape your leg, you might roll an ankle more than once. You might start to dehydrate. Your food might go out of whack, and then, keeping your eye on the prize at the end, and knowing that you can get out of those trials.
And then just take it from one station to the next, right?
Yeah.
You're not running you're not running a 50K. You're running 5 10Ks, right?
Yeah.
You just got to get to the next aid station, get some food, get some water.
Yeah, and
take a second to reset and then get back out there.
Yeah, and that's a hidden element I think that you mentioned is for me, I say in past life I used to be an engineer, so I always had the ability to break things down into its smallest component. And if I was able to do that, you're breaking things down in your smallest component. If you take care of those small components, then you're going to be able to take care of all those little pieces down the road.
One bite at a time.
Yep. And then and then you have to be able to adapt at the same time to when things don't go right.
Yeah.
But being able to break things down into piece part components, like, okay, now I can start thinking about my race. All right, aid station 1 to 2. This is what the terrain looks like. This is what I would eat. This is how much I need to drink. This is how much electrolytes I need to take. So it becomes all of a sudden you break into little components, and there's this puzzle that you're putting together.
Yeah.
And then it ends up being this beautiful picture with you crossing the finish line at the end.
Life in a day.
Yeah, life in a day.
It's a good place to start wrapping up.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
You can always check us out, athletic-equation.com. Got Athletic Equation Trail Endurance Events as our group page.
On Facebook?
On Facebook.
Yeah.
We've also got, for the ladies out there interested in the No Man's 50K, we've got No Man's 50K group webpage.
That's its standalone website?
Yeah, standalone website, standalone group Facebook page run by one of our participants who's helping me with social media.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, that's it. And then our races, and then hit the website up. You've got our list of events there with the races. Come by and check us out.
Come by, check it out. Run as much as you want to.
Yeah, and
then eat the good food.
Yeah, eat the good food. And if you've got any hesitation, I know you don't. You'll be out there. But if you've got any hesitation, not only Athletic Equation races, but if you're interested in trail running at all, take the time. Just look on our Athletic Equation. VHTRC.org is probably the largest trail club which we belong to on the East Coast. They've got a list of training runs. They've got a list of races too. Whatever fits your schedule, with ours, theirs, or wherever you live in this region of Orland, go volunteer. Go see what it's about. I mean, that volunteering, or if you run races and you haven't volunteered yet, come volunteer. See get a different perspective besides just being a runner and an athlete out there. And that will open your eyes.
Well, right. I mean, and I think, not to take us down another tangent, but you look at these, you look at the distances and you go, I can't do that. But then getting out there and seeing who's doing it, right? Yeah. People that look like you or look like they're not in as good a shape as you. It gives you permission to set these goals for yourself and sign up for something and see if you can accomplish it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because people, you can't. I mean, I'm sure you've heard this too. It's like, oh, you know what? I'm not a runner, or I don't have the body type for it. But if you look at ultra running, it's sort of with the running, I think there's a lot of stereotypes that come with road running. If you look at the trail running community, it's every shape and size, and there's no fast, there's no slow. It's about accomplishing, about being out there with like-minded people out in the wilderness, and just going for something that's a little bit tougher than what your average person wants to do.
And the dirty secret is everybody can do it.
Yeah, right. And that's when you said earlier, with a good buddy of mine, Dennis Cook, I'll plug him. And for those of you out west, check out his race series. But I'll tell you, the one thing I would say, if you can carve out the time, maybe be a little bit selfish. If you've run a 10K, you can run a 50 miler. You can run a 50K. We'll start there. You can run a 50 miler. You can run a 100 miler.
Yeah.
I'm convinced of that.
Yeah.
It's a matter of priorities and commitment. And maybe it's simple as, hey, I'm one and done. I've met many people who do that. Like we talked earlier, it's impacted their lives incredibly. But I have no desire to do this again. It's sort of checking the bucket list. They push themselves further, physically, emotionally, and then psychologically too, to where they've never been before. They learned from it. They moved on. But yeah, it can be incredibly empowering. But yeah, if you can run a 10K, you just got to extrapolate it outwards to about 30 to 35 hours.
There you go. You can run a 10K. You can run 100 miles.
1 hour to 35 hours. But a lot of the thing is, a lot of the basics are the same. The training elements. It's just, you have to.
It's picking a goal, setting a plan, sticking to the plan.
Which is just like life.
Yeah.
Whether it's in your personal life, work, your hobbies. A little piece of life.
There you go. Alex
24 hours.
Papadopoulos, thank you for coming out.
Brian Glass, thank you.
All right.